I'd like to thank our sponsors this evening, Garth's Brew Bar, our lovely bartender, Eric, today. Round of applause, round of applause. You're welcome. Thank you. Next, we have Spoken Frame Media, our lovely video sponsor this evening. Wesley, would you like to speak a little bit about Spoken Frame?
Yeah, my name's Wesley Morgan with Spoken Frame Media. We're a video production company that focuses specifically on testimonial video production. So client testimonials, employee recruitment videos, and company overviews. Basically anything with an interview B-roll is our specialty. Thanks.
And then last but not least, our main sponsor of the evening, Windbound. And we're so grateful to have Greg back who can come speak about Windbound.
Back from my 2-month hiatus, lost in the desert. It's actually on a little vacation. My wife scheduled it. I had nothing to do with it. Apologies to everybody here. Thanks for everybody for coming out. Greg Mischio from Windbound. We are a digital sales and marketing agency, and we provide what we like to say is we help you create a digital twin of your sales team using content. We specialize in the industrial and manufacturing sector, and that's where I met Meaghan Ziemba, tonight's speaker. Meaghan is a fantastic, I definitely categorize you as an influencer in the niche. She has a podcast called Mavens of Manufacturing. She does amazing work within the sector, and I thought she'd be fantastic to come out and talk to us tonight about a very important topic. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Meaghan Ziemba. We also have a little tradition here.
Okay.
We do a little selfie here with the presenter in the crowd. So everybody raise your glass, virtually too. There we go.
Awesome.
All right, Meaghan, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Greg, for the invitation to come out here to Madison to speak with you. And thank you to all of our sponsors again. My name is Meaghan Ziemba, and welcome to this evening's presentation. Before we get started, you're probably wondering, who the hell is this chick? So I'm a woman of many obsessions. If you take a look at the slide, I'm obsessed with words, hence why I'm a tech writer. I love coffee mugs that have fun things on them. So the one in the corner showcases both of those obsessions. And I'm also obsessed with Dwight Schrute from The Office. It's one of my favorite TV shows. And then I'm obsessed with continuous learning and improvement. I have both a bachelor's and a master's degree in professional and technical writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I'm also obsessed with my family. So as you can see, I'm the youngest of 6 kids. My oldest brother, Kevin, calls me the bookend of the family. I have 3 kids of my own. My oldest daughter is actually at the University of Oak Ridge studying to be a surgical nurse. And then I have my 2 sons, Declan and Ronan, who are just monsters in their own right. And then my lovely husband, who I've been married to for 6 years. He is a police officer, and I would not be here without his support because he supports all my crazy ideas like going on. 13 nieces and nephews, all of them living except for one, unfortunately. My oldest sister lost her firstborn, so she's always close to my heart. And then I'm also obsessed with CrossFit. I don't know if that's a healthy obsession or just crazy for someone my age. I like to stay young and fit, and I fool myself all the time thinking that I should still keep doing something that excessive. And then I'm obsessed with cooking and trying to create decorative cakes and I'm also obsessed with inspiring the next generation, specifically women, into male-dominated industries, which is a great segue into our presentation this evening. So what are we going to chat about today? The first thing, I'm going to kind of briefly go over some of the male-dominated industries that exist within today. And then we're going to talk about, why diversity matters and some of the advantages and disadvantages companies face if they don't decide to diversify. And then what changes businesses can do to help diversify their workforce. and then get into a checklist for men, because we need our men allies, because without our men mentors, it would be hard to be successful in male dominated industries. So we need to have those open dialogues and partnerships with men, and then providing some closing thoughts, and then hopefully we can open up the floor to all of you here with some questions. I don't know if that's available for the virtual link. If so, yeah, let's get this started. So what are some of the male dominated industries that exist today? These are just 10 of them that I thought were interesting. So we have piloting, finance, construction, automotive, mechanical engineering, architecture, electricians, IT software and development, manufacturing, and firefighting. As you can see on the slide, so with piloting, there's a total of 8.4% representation for than women. Only 7% are commercial pilots. And then in finance, 6 out of 107 major financial institutions in the United States are led by women CEOs. In construction, the total laborers, women represent 3.3%, but managers in that same sector represent 8.1%, which I found was shocking, because I think that's pretty high, especially in construction. And then automotive, it's only 2%, mechanical engineering 8%, architecture 22.6%, electricians 1.8%, IT software development, they broke it down for computer network architects at 7.9%, and software developers at 19%. And then manufacturing is 30%, and that's my bread and butter. I'm from manufacturing, so I have a lot to say about that. And then firefighting is less than 5%. So when you start to think about these opportunities, a lot of the sectors that are male dominated are facing a skills gap or a worker shortage. So why does that matter? You can go to the next slide. I like to speak about the manufacturing sector. So these are some stats from that area. It's predicted that 2.1 million jobs are going to be unfilled in manufacturing. So for every one job seeker, there's 2 positions available that are open, and then currently there's 834,000 open positions within manufacturing. It's only going to get worse if we don't start figuring out how to close the skills gap as well as the gender gap. So what are some of the disadvantages versus the advantages in terms of diversifying your workforce? And this can be applied to any male dominated industry, not just manufacturing. So the disadvantages within not diversifying your workforce include increased threats to our global competitiveness and long-term growth. There's a slowdown in research and development, which also decreases the opportunities for innovation. And then there's other foregone business opportunity, and the one major one for manufacturing is national security threats. So if you think about each of the industries that I highlighted before, one of the things, aviation, right now they're going through a pilot shortage. So a lot of the requirements, which I didn't know, is they have a retirement age of 65. So once you hit 65, you can no longer be a pilot. Well, more people are retiring from that industry than we can find people to fill those open positions. So what's that going to mean as a whole society? We're going to have more delayed flights because we all love those. We're not going to have a lot of people buying tickets. Maybe ticket prices will go up. It's the same with like firefighting. If we don't start filling these positions within firefighting, you know, that's a safety concern for communities as a whole. With manufacturing, if we don't start filling up these positions, that's going to slow down productivity. It's going to slow down purchasing. And then, you know, we're already in an inflation area. So it's only going to make things worse. So some of the advantages to diversifying your workforce include greater innovation and increased creativity. I'm going to go through these as a whole right now, and then I'll break them down individually. But greater innovation and increased creativity, higher engagement in the workplace, and greater opportunities for professional growth, and better decision-making and improved company culture. So what does it mean for greater innovation and increased creativity? When you diversify your workforce, you're actually bringing in multiple perspectives and multiple life experiences, which is just better because when you have one cultural group involved in your planning and your decision making, you're not as innovative. You can't have that creative thought process or critical thinking. So when you're diversifying your workforce, you're pulling thought processes from different cultures, different ethnicities, different age groups, different genders. It's just better for your overall problem solving, and you can generate more ideas that way. One of my favorite shows on TV is 60 Days In. It's actually a prison show. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because they have to create things within their prison cell to make their life a little bit more enjoyable while they're in prison. And I'm always thinking to myself, wow, if they ever get released, they'd be a great candidate for jobs like manufacturing, because they have a different perspective on how to create things that are helping them make their lives easier. So by pulling all that in, actually increasing creativity, you're getting people to talk about life experiences, they're learning from one another, which also increases engagement from your workforce. So the more people you're having these conversations about their different life experiences. The higher ups are actually pulling people in and engaging with them. And it's just more attractive to consumers as a whole too when you have a diverse workforce, because consumers want to buy from companies that relate to their own life experiences. And you can't really do that if you're only representing one cultural group. In terms of better decision making, again, it's all about diversifying that thought process, bringing in perspectives from different cultures, and then honing in on those cultural differences and learning from one another, and being able to have a unique thought process on some of the challenges that are existing within today's society. And then improve company culture. It's just proven that consumers like to buy from companies that they can relate to. So one example, and I think we can all agree to, is Nike. They have a marketing department where they're not just focusing on one cultural group, they're focusing on multiple cultural groups. They had a lot of controversy behind their Colin Kaepernick campaign, but they're not just representing males, they're representing females. They're not representing just one, it's multiple sports. They're actually getting into social justice issues. And a lot of people actually respect that and appreciate that because they feel like they can identify with some of their campaign purposes. So then you can go to the next slide. So what are some of the things that companies can start doing today to help diversify their workforce? First, you want to start wow, maybe I shouldn't have started drinking beer. First, you want to start to reevaluate your inner core values, because you don't want to have your core values and then not follow them. I've worked with plenty of companies within manufacturing where they emphasize their core values, but then they didn't do a very good job supporting those values. And it made people feel safe going to them and like complaining about anything that might happen. So you want to make sure that you're reevaluating them, educating your current employees, because if you're not at current employees, there's instances of unconscious bias that can happen. They might contribute to intentional sexism or bias, and you want to make sure that none of those things are happening. Once you start reevaluating your core values, you want to make sure that you're getting support from your executive team. It's all about setting an example. So if you don't have the support of your executive team, it's really hard to follow through with setting up new strategies, getting people on board. So how do you do that? Executive teams really like proposals that show them the value of making business decisions. So propose it to them as like a business decision. Show them the values behind diversifying your workforce. What are the numbers involved if you diversify your workforce? And some of that includes, you have an increased bottom line. You're able to reach out to more markets. You're able to reach out to more customers. So overall, it's just better for your bottom line and your profit margins. Then you want to show the value of working at your company. So if you want to click that, Wesley. Whoop, that's the wrong one. Nope. There you go. That one. Sorry. So how do you show your value? How do you show your company's value, and why is that important? Employees want to work with companies that also provide value to them. So there's a shift going on. Employees don't want to work with companies that treat them like a number. They actually want to work with companies that treat them like a human. So now more applicants are actually researching companies that they want to apply to. In their core values, 1 in 3 of the employees that apply won't apply to your company if they don't see any diversity or any efforts to be more diverse. They'll actually go apply somewhere else that they can see themselves in. So how do you show your company's value to employees, especially women who are looking for an opportunity? You want to start with showcasing your attractive pay and medical benefits. Well, what does that mean? I don't know how many of you have applied for a job where they didn't include the salary range, but I've been there before, and then I've been asked, hey, what's your salary range? Well, why are you asking me? I did that for this position, and that should be available. And I've gotten into some debates with employers about not giving them my salary range. I was strong arming them for them to provide that information to me. Be sure that you're including your salary range on your job descriptions, because that's going to show women, not just men, it's going to show women that you're open to transparency, you're interested in equal pay, and you're open to having negotiations in a fair way that you would with other groups. For medical benefits, what I'm seeing in manufacturing, because again, that's where I'm from, a lot of companies are starting to offer the same paternity leave for fathers as they are maternity leave for mothers. Top of that, they're offering childcare benefits that actually support childcare, which is a huge thing for me because I have 3 kids, and childcare is not cheap these days. Like, it's terrible. I just spoke with a HR representative from a company, and what they have is an on-site. And what that helps with is any new mother who has an infant, they're able to bring their infant to work, still keep up with their nursing schedule if they're breastfeeding, which is amazing. They have nursing facilities. So they're able to still be the mom, still have that bonding moment with their child, and still work. On top of that, as their kids get older, partnered up with their local school and their community, and they allow for pickup and drop-offs with their kids. So a mom can bring in her children, drop them off at the daycare, bus will come and pick them up, bring them to school, and then when they're done with school, they'll bring them back to the childcare facility, and then they have after-school activities. So if the mom gets stuck in meetings or whatever, the child is still, getting involved. That daycare facility is also in Iowa, so if you're from the Midwest, like we all are, we know how unpredictable weather can be. So it's really helpful for parents, especially on those snow days. For paternity leave, fathers are getting the same amount of time now and the same amount of bonding time with their kids, which is also really important to women because they want to make sure that their partner has the same opportunities that they have in terms of bonding with their kids and spending time with them. Another thing that some companies are doing is, instead of providing short-term disability, which is kind of weird because you're not disabled if you're pregnant, I just want to put that out there, they're offering full pay while you're on maternity. One is one of those companies that I think start doing that. So look that up, because I think it's really interesting and it's a game changer for anybody wanting to be a parent and still work. Go ahead, Greg. Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen much data on this. Did you get paid lower because men are jerks, or is it also because sometimes women will say that they offer up a lower salary wage? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, so Greg is asking if the lower pay has something to do with men being jerks, right? And what was the second part? So I think it's a combination of things. I think to a certain extent, for me personally, when I was asked, before I got smarter, when I was asked about, what's your worth, I was lowballing it. And I feel like women have a tendency to be less confident in their qualifications and skill sets. So one of the things I'm going to touch on later is that job ads, when women read a job ad, if they don't feel like they're 100% qualified for a position, they're not going to apply to it. Of men, or not 60% of men, where men, if they feel like they're 60% qualified for it, they're going to be like, oh, I can do this. And then they're going to apply. So I think it's like a confident issue for one. Two, I think it's the lack of knowledge and not doing research. So now what I do is if I'm applying for a new position, I make sure I'm going on Monster or Glassdoor or any of those job platforms that are available. And you can usually Google the salary range for positions, and it usually is pretty neutral. It's like an overall average of what you should be getting. I also think that women are a little timid around negotiation. I don't know if it's a lack of knowledge how to negotiate or if it's not confident enough. And even still, if they do get a salary range, like I remember my first position right out of college, I was told this is what we pay for this position. And I was like, sweet, I'll take it. I never took the chance to negotiate for a higher salary range. So I think it's doing your research, believing in your skill set, not second doubting yourself, and just knowing that you're worth what you deserve to be paid, and then doing that research around the salary range and just not taking no for an answer. So I think we have some work to do. There's women out there who are great at it. I'm getting better. So, but yeah, I think it's just, we appreciate what we're getting because we're more collaborative than competitive versus men. So if something's told, hey, this is what it is, we don't really think to renegotiate that salary range. Does that answer your question? Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? So what happens if we go into recession? Do you think we're going to move backwards in this progress? I think if we don't start doing something to close the skills gap, that's going to make it worse. So right now we're already struggling to fill these positions in. During the pandemic, there was the start of this, they called it the Great Resignation. So a lot of people, particularly the millennial, wow, that's a really hard word to say, the millennial generation, they were retiring from their jobs that they didn't feel they were appreciated. And with the younger generations, they're demanding that work-life balance. They want to have, they don't have the same values that the baby boomers had. So they want to be able to work with a company that is flexible to their life balance needs. I feel like if we don't start adapting some of these recruiting efforts and how we are employing potential applicants, they're going to go somewhere else or they're going to figure it out on their own. So like for me, for example, I wasn't happy in the corporate world. So I figured out, okay, I can probably do this on my own. So then I started my own business and I'm a lot happier. I think because millennials, Gen Zers, and then Generation Alpha, they all have a computer right at their hands and they're doing a lot more research than we used to do. So they're really connected to worldviews. And I think if we don't figure out how to bring them more into the workforce, then yes, it's going to be a bigger problem. It's going to be a harder gap to close. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. So then the next thing, you can go back to that slide. The next thing is flexible work practices and work-life balance. So This might not be possible in some sectors. Ooh, that would have been terrible. This might not be possible in some industries. For instance, manufacturing, there are positions, and again, I'm going back to my bread and butter. There are positions that require someone to be on call all the time or on the shop floor. So how can you work around that? That pandemic really opened up a lot of people's eyes on hybrid situations and remote work. So before, when manufacturers are like, no, you have to be in the office, the pandemic kind of forced us to see that, no, we don't have to show up every day. You can take Zoom calls, which got really annoying fairly quickly, mind you, but it did open up the door for hybrid opportunities. The other thing is that, you know, not everybody likes the 9 to 5. So can you offer some flex scheduling? I knew people in the manufacturing sector who woke up at like 2:30 in the morning when they're actually at work by 3:30. Why they thought that was a good idea, I don't know. I mean, there's night shifts and everything, but they actually got up to be at work by 3:30 and they were done by 2. And I think it's because with their partner, they had kids pick up and everything. So thinking outside of the box, how can you offer those flex work practices and work-life balance? Can you do, you know, part of the week from home? Can they work, you know, 12 or 13-hour days so that they can have every Friday off? Can they work weekends? Can they, you know, shift between a morning schedule and an evening schedule? Is there an opportunity for them when they're sick, when their kids are sick? Because I know perfectly well, especially with 3 kids, things happen, knock on wood, that my boys have not been in the emergency room for some serious, but, you know, thinking along those lines of, okay, your kid is sick, you can go home, we're not going to penalize you for it because you're being productive when you come back to work and you're actually meeting your quota or surpassing it. Another great thing that I think is happening is a lot more companies are considering mental health days, which I really appreciate, being diagnosed with clinical depression. One of the companies that I worked for, I had a really great manager. She knew that something was off with me. She didn't ask any questions. She just said, you need a mental health day, go home. Don't worry about taking a sick day. I will back you up. When you come back, just make sure you get your work done. She even allowed me to get my work done from home, and she didn't count it against me. I didn't get a sick day taken away, a vacation day taken away. It was like I went home for the weekend or something. So thinking about opportunities like that. And then other things that I know what people are doing. So transportation is a huge obstacle for some families as well as some mothers. And one individual that I know, his name is Andrew Crow. When he was working at a manufacturing floor, he was actually offering gas gift cards to moms. So if they couldn't find a ride or didn't have the money to Uber, he would give them gift cards so that they could get back and forth from work, which I think is really cool. So just treating people again like they're human and thinking outside of the box and not penalizing them for things that are happening in life that are out of our control, I think is a really great effort. And then personal development and career progression is huge. The younger generations particularly want to know that they can move up the ladder in your company. They want to know that they have opportunities to grow professionally, and companies that invest in your professional growth are more attractive, specifically to women, because you're investing in them. And so how can you do that? There's a lot of opportunities to offer, you know, secondary education or scholarships or internships. I've worked with companies where if somebody wanted to take a class on like CAD design, or if they wanted to take an extra class on a leadership course, they would actually reimburse the employee for taking that class. And it's just a benefit to them because then they're bringing that knowledge back to the workforce. They're applying it to what they're doing in the workforce, and it's actually helping them. I know that the WTMA, which is an organization in Illinois, they offer a grant to women who already are in the field of manufacturing. And basically the grant is for anything they want it to be for. So if it's for childcare, if it's to take an extra course, if it's for equipment or materials that they need, they get that money with no questions asked. They just have to go through an application process, and then their manager has to approve their application. So there's different ways that you can help show your company's value, and you can add this stuff onto your website. You can include it in your job description, and more women tend to be more attractive to positions that advertise professional growth, flexible work hours, and medical benefits that matter to them. So you want to go back. So then 4, highlight current women employees. Why does this matter? Because representation matters. No one's going to want to work at a company where they don't see themselves personally. It's really hard to feel like part of the team if you're looking around and no one looks like you. This is something that gets brought up in a lot of male-dominated industries, and there's a lot of negativity, particularly around manufacturing. Again, it's my bread and butter. A lot of issues with sexism, a lot of unconscious bias, locker room talk, excuses like, well, this is how it's always been done. You need thicker skin. We really need to stop using language like that and start adapting where it's an all-inclusive environment, because if we don't start doing that, women are going to go somewhere else, like nursing or childcare or teaching. That's just how it's going to be. So what are some of the things you can do to get women excited about coming to your company and working for you? You can share women's success stories. So whether it's, the intern that came from a community college and they're doing great things during their coursework, put that on all of your social channels. Whether it's, you have an employee of the month. A lot of companies now on LinkedIn specifically are highlighting their employees. Some of them are celebrating work anniversaries. So if they were with the company for 20 years, that's a big deal. If they like working with the company, they're not going to leave, right? So highlight that. Oh, they just celebrated their 20-year anniversary. Hugely, successful from what I've seen on LinkedIn, celebrating those long work anniversaries, because it shows that they give a crap about their employees, and the employees are willing to say. You also want to showcase your women leaders. One of the major issues in manufacturing is some women don't think that they can climb up the ladder. It's not true. Like, you can climb up the ladder in any occupation that you decide to pursue, but how are they going to know that if they don't see other women employees? So a lot of companies are looking into adding more women to their board of directors. I actually was at an organization in Illinois, and they had a wall of all of their board directors. I think I counted 3 or 4 women, and I was like, well, this is a problem. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you need to change this, because why would a woman want to join this organization if they don't think they can be part of the decision-making process? Like, how can we get more women on this board? So that's one of the things that I'm trying to help companies with too, is, representation matters. So showcase your leadership, show what they're doing in the community. If they're speaking at an event, market that event. If they're, doing a presentation, market that out, invite people to come by, open up your doors for facility tours, have them, speak to the community, have them get in front of kids at high schools, go to career fairs, go to career days. I can't tell you how many times my youngest son told me he wants to be a police officer because every day he sees his dad coming in with his police gear. And I'm just like, you got to stop doing that, because I don't want him to be a police officer. And then my other son wants to be like a firefighter because he just thinks fire trucks are better than police cars. And I kind of agree with him. The other thing is develop all girl mentorships. I've spoken with a lot of high school kids. Some of them are very timid coming to the real life workforce, because I don't feel schools as a whole are doing a great job, because they need to be sociable and doing interviews. So how can we help build up their confidence? There was an instance, I interviewed Andrew Crow. Again, I'm going to bring him up. He actually was teaching CNC machining, and one of his best students was this girl named Kayla. She went for an interview, and she had 2 male interviewers. She's a great human being. I've talked to her personally. She's very sociable, but something in that interview happened where there was a disconnect. The interviewers were uncomfortable with her. She was uncomfortable with them. So it came across as she didn't really want to be there, and then they came across as they didn't really want her there. So when the news got back to Andrew, he was like, wait a minute, Kayla's like my best scoring student. She's like the mom of the group. She's always asking, people if they need help, how she can help them. She's providing extra education to them. She's helping them with, setting up their machines. This doesn't make any sense. Well, sometimes because men think differently than women and you put them together, there's going to be a little awkwardness. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. So what can you do to build that confidence up? All girl mentorships help women relate to who's mentoring them. But my suggestion would be also bring men into those mentorships so that it's just not woman on women, but it's woman on woman. And then you bring in a man and you can have these conversations and they can see, where those lines of comfortableness are or what's making them uneasy. It also helps them build up their communication skills. They can adapt and switch to whoever they're talking to. Like, it's helpful to do all of that. And then if you want to go to the next slide, go ahead.
1 second.
Yeah. Oh. Sure. You've brought up Andrew a couple times. I think maybe you should tell everybody who Andrew is, because he's an amazing story, I think.
Yeah.
But one of the things before you do that, the one thing that Andrew has said to me, I've chatted with him, is that through what he does, he tries to meet people halfway.
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about is men need to meet some of these women halfway, and I'd be interested to hear maybe how that could be done.
Yeah, so I met Andrew through Mavens. I knew of him because he was on a podcast called Making Chips, and I just fell in love with his personality. The community that I grew up in, they have a high population of Black and brown individuals, and the high school that I went to, I grew up with a lot of those kids, and some of their life experiences were very sad to me because I couldn't imagine being in situations like that. So when I went back to Beloit to have a conversation about manufacturing and the career opportunities that are available, I wanted to make a connection with those kids. I knew that was going to be impossible because I'm a white girl. How are they going to connect with someone like me that didn't experience the things that they experienced? Andrew Crow is from St. Louis, Missouri. He's a 2-time convicted felon. He was a kingpin in St. Louis. He met his wife, Whitney, who's also fantastic, when they were like 14 or 15 years old. They had their first kid at a really young age, and then they have 3 altogether. But he told me, he was like, when I was in prison, I was sick and tired of hearing, you have 2 minutes left to talk to your son. And he was like, I didn't want to keep living that life. So when he got out of jail, he got introduced to manufacturing. He went into CNC machining, and he says it saved my life. It gave me a second chance. So he learned everything about CNC machining. He became a technical college professor. And now he's doing a manufacturing renaissance tour where he's going from city to city, speaking to urban city kids, and trying to, because a lot of them don't even know what it is. They didn't even know that it was a possibility for them. When I brought him to Beloit and he spoke in front of the high school that I graduated from, he had kids in tears because they didn't think that they had the opportunity to grow within manufacturing. So I think people halfway. There was a lot of conversation on LinkedIn, and this problem, how do we solve it? And everybody just kept talking about it and offering opinions. And you can't really do that to solve a problem. You have to put your boots to the ground and actually go in front of people and say, hey, what are your obstacles? Because it's going to vary from community to community. Not every community is the same economically wise. So what sort of challenges does each community or roadblock each community have? That's why Andrew's doing this tour. He wants to have those one-on-one conversations, not just with the students, not just with the leadership, not just with the teachers, but also the parents. I feel like the generation that I grew up in, we're suffering from a little PTSD in terms of the manufacturing sector, because when we were in high school, it took a dive, and a lot of parents were like, we don't want our kids to enter this sector because it's not stable. It's not a stable career choice, which is completely not true. So with this tour, we're meeting people halfway. We're becoming part of the conversation. We're starting the conversation. And I think that's one of the future things that I'm going to be talking about later on in the presentation, how men can be allies, is really just inviting people to the conversation, not just talking about it, but being about it. So again, putting your boots to the ground, being where the problem is, immersing yourself in that problem, and then figuring out to be part of the solution. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Any other questions?
For the online viewers.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier a skills gap in manufacturing, and I actually have background. My career was mainly in retail marketing,
Okay.
et cetera, for the food industry. So a lot of that talks about manufacturing where I am now. So you talk about skills gaps. Is it truly like physical skills gaps? Like you think women don't have the background for manufacturing jobs, or is it just a difference in the transition of leadership, right? Because I will say I started at a very young age in grocery retail, and it was a white male dominated market at that time. And I think it's just now, and that's 25 years. I think it's just now maybe flipping a little bit, right? So when you talk about skills gaps, because I actually represent a lot of manufacturers now, and what I do, is it really truly like a skill? You know what I'm saying? Like how do you define that?
So there's different opinions about the skills gap. So some call it a gender gap, some call it a skills gap, some call it a training gap. There are a lot of baby boomers that are going to be leaving. So Deloitte's not the only study about the available positions that I mentioned earlier. The Manufacturing Institute and then the Women in Manufacturing also did a study. So before, the Deloitte study said there was only like 28% women representation. And then once the WIM organization and Manufacturing Institute did their study, we bumped it up like 2%, which is fantastic. But again, it's not enough to fill the available position. So then now manufacturers are not just focusing on the next generation, but they're also focusing on the current generation. So there's the second chance potentials to our inmates right now, and what are they going to do when they get out of prison? So there's a lot of funding going into correctional facilities, teaching them the basic skill sets of the trades. And then there's also the level at the high school level and even elementary level. Because back in the day, you know, vocational learning was put on the back burner, and what they were focusing on was the only way you could be successful is if you go to a 4-year university and become like a lawyer or a doctor or something else, and then they outsourced all of our manufacturing to other countries in the world. We're starting to see that there was a problem there because, you know, manufacturing is a huge foundation base for a strong economic community. So I think it's a combination of things. I think some communities don't have the resources to teach some of these skills to the younger generations. So they're not going to know what manufacturing or engineering is. So therefore, they're not going to pursue it. The communities that do have the resources to teach those type of skills, I think it's an awareness issue and an exposure issue. They're not talking about it in the way that people are actually working. So how do we reskill not just, you know, the current employees, because some of the baby boomers are not technically literate like the younger generations. Like my kids know how to work their iPad. My kid just tried calling me from his iPad on my way here, and I'm like, "You're 5. What are you doing? Like, how do you know how to do this?" So I think we need to reskill not just the older generations who are currently in the manufacturing sector to catch up with some of these advanced technologies, but we also need to reskill the teachers because they're still going off the basic curriculum that they learned getting their degree. And I had one guy tell me a story. He's like, yeah, the Votech teacher has a robot in his classroom, but he doesn't know how to use it because no one taught him how to use it. And I was like, well, that's a problem. How do we fix that? So there's a gentleman in Wisconsin named Matt Goosey, and he created a program called SOS, which is Save Our Schools. So he's able to get government funding within his community where Votech teachers get an additional $5,000 added to their yearly salary. So they get an additional $5,000 monthly salary added to their base salary. And what that does is that it allows them to go to his facility, learn how he's CNCing machining products. He's teaching the teachers his skill sets, and then they're able to bring that back to the school and teach the kids how he's actually using it in real life situations. So I think it's a combination of things, and that's why we need everyone involved, not just government officials, not just manufacturers, not just teachers. We need to get everybody involved. Like my mom says, it takes a village. It's true in terms of the manufacturing sector. I think that's the case for any industry that's male dominated. We need to do a better job exposing the opportunities within each of those industries and doing a better job promoting it to women, because as a society, we traditionally teach girls how to play differently from how guys are taught how to play. And that's a huge problem. One of the things that is important in engineering is spatial recognition, and kids who grew up with Lego blocks or construction toys score higher than kids who don't play with those types of toys, which is a huge thing to have when you're engineering something. You need to recognize how all the parts fit together. So doing better on that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I was talking, so I know we were talking tonight about women, like specifically women in manufacturing, but I totally agree 100% with the whole broad picture that you just talked about.
Yeah.
I think that there was an issue that we were trying to solve before COVID, right? It's not just because of COVID, I just think it's more height because of COVID, but just manufacturing in general or the other industries, the hard or soft skill difference, right? Skills gap of the women and the men.
Again, I think it's a combination of both. I think girls are getting, so for instance, and I'm bringing my personal experience in this, I suck at math and science, always scored high in English. And I was always told, you're going to be an English teacher, a college professor. Why? That wasn't interesting to me. I always wanted to play with what my brothers were playing with. But because I wasn't scoring high in certain areas, I was guided into another direction. So I think we need to understand that just because someone has a skill set in one area doesn't mean that it can't be applied in another area. So we need to do a better job with communication skills, especially with the younger generations, because they're on their phones all the time. I think when they have that face-to-face communication, some of them clam up because they're used to texting on their phone all the time. My daughter is a prime example. Like, she freaks out when she has to talk to people face-to-face because she's just used to communicating with them on texting. So we got to change that as well too. Any more questions? No? Oh, okay. Let's fast forward through this stuff. So one of the areas that I found interesting, just because I'm a writer and I like language, and I need to kind of sort through my cards here because I don't want to provide you the wrong information. But one of the areas that discourages women from applying to a specific job is job ads. So you want to be mindful, if you're part of creating these job descriptions, what sort of language that you're using. So the first thing is, be mindful of your word choices. There are such things as masculine and feminine words. And if you're using terms like rock star or ninja, I personally don't get offended. Like, I like being called a rock star or ninja. I just think it's cool. And I think of Wonder Woman anytime I think of superhero. But those can kind of turn off some women applicants. So you want to make sure that you're using terms that are gender neutral, and just making sure that you're not unconsciously separating anyone from the group. Another thing is you want to limit the number of qualifications and must-haves. So I mentioned this earlier, where if women don't feel like they meet every single qualification on a job ad, more likely than not, they're not going to apply for that position. Whereas men, if they feel like they can get 60% of it, they're going to apply for it. Also, the number of bullets can deter a woman from applying somewhere. So make sure you're absolutely including what's a priority in terms of qualifications or requirements. And then you want to focus on diversity and be sincere about it. So if you are a company that's really trying to diversify your workforce, make sure you're including on the job description those efforts that you're trying to make. And you can include like something on your website that talks about their efforts that you're doing to diversify your workforce, or you can offer some information for some events that you're doing or programs that you're entering. You also want to include family-friendly policies. I touched on this before, where, you know, if a mom wants to enter the workforce, you know, what are some of the benefits that you're providing so that they can do that? That goes for any parent as well. If you just have friendly family policies, they're going to know that you're open to like having them take certain days off because their kids are sick, or if they have a snow day, maybe they can work from home. The other is look for collaborative team players. So women tend to be more collaborative than men. Men tend to be more competitive. So you want to make sure that you're including language that showcases team efforts and collaboration versus, you know, anything that might come across as competitive. And then you want to include salary ranges, like I mentioned before, because that just showcases that you're open and transparent about equal pay. And then you want to eliminate language around forced fund. So I don't know if any of you worked with a company where they're just like, yeah, if you work hard, you can play hard. And if you stay extra hours, we're going to go out drinking or do something like this. That can come across as unattractive for certain individuals. And it kind of shows them that maybe you're expecting them to work longer hours than they want to. So you really want to avoid pressuring them into a situation that they don't feel comfortable in. So make sure you're transparent that, yes, you would like to do group events and company events, but if people don't want to participate in those, they shouldn't have to. And really, that's something that's more internal and it doesn't really have anything to do with the job. So you might just want to eliminate all of that together on a job description. Next slide. So what are a few tips that men can go by? I know that there's not very many in here, which is exciting to see for someone who is always wanting more women in the room. But you want to lead by example, and the rest kind of just fall under that first bullet point. You also want to invite women to the table, cultivate supportive partnerships, call out the bullshit, referrals, and be a mentor. So leading by example really encompasses all of that. You want to show other employees and other men that you're a supporter of women. So when someone acts inappropriately, you want to make sure you're calling that inappropriate behavior out. You want to make sure that you're reporting it and that you're sticking up for the women so that they can feel safe in that type of work environment. You also want to invite women to the table. So one of the questions that I got from one of my collaborators, he was like, you know, I looked at all of my guests on my show and it's mostly men. How do I get more women on my show? And I'm like, you asked them to come on your show. It's not that. And he goes, really? And I'm like, do you need email introductions? Is that why you're coming to me? Like, I can give you email introductions. So I was able to give him a list of like 10 to 15 women that I thought would be great guests on his show. And he actually got like 50-60% of them. So I was really proud that he came to me, asked me how to do that. And I think it's the same in a work environment. If you notice that a woman is not speaking up or talking, maybe call her out. Say, hey, so-and-so, what do you feel about this idea? Or what questions do you have surrounding that concept? Or what do you think we should do about this situation? And inviting them into the conversation makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And if you keep doing it, more than not, they're going to start opening up on their own. Calling out the bullshit is just all the negative comments. I know that there are some companies who have locker room talk and, oh, this is how things have always been done. They have posters of naked women around. Yes, I've been in those companies. Just take that stuff down. Don't have that at all, because no woman wants to work in that. And then referrals. So if a woman is doing a good job and you see her progressing forward and she's excelling, make sure you're referring her to other opportunities. Be that support for her. If she deserves a promotion, tell leadership she deserves a promotion. She should get this job. once she gets into that leadership role, make sure that support continues on, because I know some people will kind of back off once someone is promoted and they don't provide that affirmation. So then some women will think, oh, maybe I'm not doing a good job. They kind of suffer from imposter syndrome. Just keep affirming that they're doing a good job and that they deserve that promotion, and then be a mentor. So I would not be where I'm at today without the male mentors in my life. Manufacturing has been male dominated for several years, and it's the encouragement of the men that I surround myself with that have kept me going. And I see them supporting other women in the manufacturing sector. So it's really refreshing. So don't think just because you're a guy, you can't be a mentor to a woman. I would not have started Meaghan Ziemba Manufacturing if one of my good friends and mentors told me how ridiculous I was being and scared. And it would not be here today without his advice. So make sure you're providing that mentorship. And then also make sure you're connecting women to organizations that are women focused. So within manufacturing, there is Women in Manufacturing, the Society of Women Engineers. They have new groups with women in 3D printing, women who weld. These groups really help women connect with other women on a national level. And then they have events. So if you're a company owner and you want to provide that support for women, get a corporate membership or suggest a corporate membership, and then allow those women to go to those events so that they can relate to other women and ask questions. And I think that's it. So I know we talked about a lot. I feel like I was rambling on a lot. So we went over why diversity matters, what companies can do to attract more women applicants, why representation matters, tips for job ads that women would apply to, and how men can be better allies. So I'm going to open up the floor for more questions if any of you have them. No? Hey, Greg.
Very interested in this topic. One thing that you didn't mention that I've been doing a lot of reading about is emotional intelligence. And I think that's one area where men are quite horrible at, to be quite frank, as the more I read about it. And I think it gets this perception of being very, touchy-feely or whatever, and, just the whole locker room mentality of how men are raised and things like that. But like Gary Vaynerchuk says, emotional intelligence is going to be the predominant trait for most successful people. And I feel like it's an area where men are horrible at, and I think women are very strong at. Yeah. And that might be just by virtue of how we're raised, but I don't know what you think about emotional intelligence and how that plays into the conversation.
I think it is a huge factor, especially within male-dominated industries, because you're absolutely right. Men think differently than women, and women tend to be more socially aware. So they want to bring people together. They want to be more collaborative, which causes us to be more empathetic towards people in their situations. So for example, if someone cancels a meeting on me because they have something going on, I don't get upset about it. I understand life happens, and I'm empathetic towards that situation, especially if it has something to do with their kids. I can relate to that because I have kids, and sometimes things just, when it rains, it pours sometimes for me. I think we need to start refocusing results driven to actually growth driven. So if people are producing and they're happy, that should be what matters, and not, oh, you're showing up at this time every single day. You didn't clock in at this time. Oh, you took an extra 10 minutes on your break, and kind of crucifying them for it. So yes, I think emotional intelligence is highly important for us to come together in a more collaborative way. And especially if you want more women to come into male-dominated industries, we have to be able to be more empathetic to some of their situations. Does that make sense?
Do you think that, and sorry if there are any HR people in the room, right? But how HR plays that role in this, because a lot of times we have to be fair to everybody. We have to have these exact rules, or this is a template for a job application, et cetera. Because they're more worried about the litigious side of it, right? Like, do you think that is where a conversation needs to start, or the leaders in I think a lot about something you said earlier and how it relates to ESG and the ESG movement right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's so attractive to the younger generation.
hmm
But being fair means different than what it did 15 years ago in an HR setting.
Yeah, I don't envy anybody in HR, to be honest with you, especially if you're working with companies who might be smaller in size and are actually family owned, because those seem to be the toughest companies to actually bring in some of these new policies, because again, they have that, well, this is how we've always done it mentality. And I've worked with some of those companies before, and it's been really hard to speak up in terms of like difficult situations, especially if it was someone in leadership that was doing the bad behavior. So I think we do need to have some sort of, and I'm not an expert in HR. I don't know what is occurring in that place to make some of these things better. But I would personally probably need to do more research on that, just because I don't know like what the trends are in HR and how they're working with companies. I just know that I've worked in companies where I would go to HR with a problem and they were just like, we can't do anything about it because it's a leadership member. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I had to like find a new job because I just wasn't happy and it wasn't going to change. Any other questions? No? Okay. If you want, you can contact me. There's another slide. I like QR codes. I just use one out there and it's awesome. That's my LinkedIn profile. If you want to schedule a meeting with me, that's my Calendly link and then my email at the bottom. But I am, so one of my side gigs, and this is my shameless plug, Greg, I didn't tell you that I was doing this, but I am a host of Meaghan Ziemba Manufacturing, which is in the manufacturing sector. And I just like sharing stories of women who are involved in manufacturing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the shop floor or actually making things. If you're in HR, if you're in marketing, and you want to share your story, connect with me because I'd love to share it for you.
All right. Thank you, Meaghan, so much. Great presentation. And then join us next month. The date again, Kelly?
November 28th,
November 28th for
Kristen Utek.
Kristen UTAC. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.